Hi, I'm Sunena Gupta, and I'm an associate at Cleantech Group and the Resources and Environmental Management team. And today we're going to be talking about wildfire tech and focusing on what kind of tech innovations are coming about to increase our resilience against wildfires. And so here in San Diego in the Southern California region, we've just come out the other end from some devastating wildfires. So it's really a timely topic to talk about how we can prevent this in the future. And I'm excited to have Jay here today from Convective Capital, which is quite a unique VC focusing on fire tech and ensuring that we can increase that resilience part of things. So thank you for joining us here today, Jay. I would love to kind of kick things off by getting a brief overview from you of what that investment landscape looks like for fire tech and what exciting technologies you've seen recently.
Thanks for having me. So the landscape is broad. The way we think about it is prevention, suppression, and then recovery, right? All sort of the ends of the spectrum there. How do we stop fires from happening? What do we do when they are occurring? And then how do we help people rebuild their lives, their homes, their communities? And in terms of an investable landscape, it's nascent, but there's a ton of momentum. At Convective, we've identified and talked to over 600 companies. And the way I feel about it is almost like we're in this commercial space in 2001 moment, or fintech in 2008, 2009, defense tech in 2016. I think fire tech is having that moment, and we see more and more repeat entrepreneurs and talented folks who have decided that this is the problem they're going to solve. I think that bodes really well for us.
Yeah, I think definitely what we've seen on the research team is just more and more interest in scaling these technologies, and there's such a big need. Every time we have these wildfires, it's just another reminder that we need to get there faster. I'm just curious, with these fires that were just happened, has that kind of changed the way you look at what technologies to focus on, or has it changed your investment thesis at all?
It hasn't changed what we focus on or where we focus, but what it has done is increased the amount of attention on the problem. It's increased the amount of focus that customers, whether that's utilities, insurance companies, governments, or private asset owners, how much they're paying attention. And it's also increased investor appetite. And what that means is that these companies that historically had been a bit more starved for investor and equity capital have the opportunity to run really fast. And that's going to allow them to have a tremendous impact across the spectrum that we talked about just a moment ago.
So I've seen a little more appetite from investors, but I'm curious to understand in terms of the customer side of things, who are these customers that are really engaging with these technologies, and do you expect any types of changes, whether that's more involvement from corporates or governments or anything like that?
So the biggest customer segment today is utilities. What we've seen over the last few years is almost an existential risk. We saw PG&E file for bankruptcy as a result of the Camp Fire. We have Hawaiian Electric that just had a $4 or $5 billion settlement as a result of the Maui fires. We've got Pacific Corp, who's being sued for $30 billion. Very potentially, we know that there's a chance that the fires in LA were partially utility started. And what this means is that boards of directors are taking notice. It reminds me a lot of cybersecurity, where the impetus is here, the risk to the businesses are here, and they're existential. Now, we also see government, whether that's municipal governments or firefighting organizations or state firefighting organizations like CAL FIRE, and they're all accelerating their adoption as well. And then finally, the insurance losses are going to be too great to ignore. And historically, it's been hard for insurers to figure out how to become good customers rather than good distribution channels. But that is also changing. They need to find ways to produce risk mitigation, not only risk transfer mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I know your team has invested in around, I think, 20 companies, you said? I guess, can you share a little bit about what types of technologies there are in there? Are there any gaps that you think that you would want to invest in the future? Or, just a brief overview of that.
So we've invested in everything from situational awareness, which can be early detection of fires or creating a better understanding of how those fires are behaving. We've invested in companies that help with fuels treatment, like BurnBot. So how do you thin the forest? How do you do prescribed burning? How do you protect homes and communities from fires encroaching on them? companies like Fireside who help with defensible space work and community hardening as a whole. But the other thing that we look at a lot is how do we make resilience technology also economically productive? So how do we do things like increase the ability to create timber and create wood products out of forest and not turn that into waste? How do we increase the safety of utility scale solar, which operates near our communities, but also needs to be more efficient? This can't only be risk minimization because it's very hard for customers to internalize a risk avoided as opposed to increasing top line. And we need both of those solutions to be effective.
Yeah, definitely. And so on the research team, I recently did some work on climate resilient infrastructure. So in that, spoke to a bunch of primary and secondary sources. And I think one of the hypotheses that we came up with last month was that there's just going to be more and more interest in that intersection between wildfire and grid resilience. And I know you've invested in Gridware and I think Rhizome as well. Just curious to get your perspective on whether that is a trend that you see is increasing and what are you excited about there?
So utilities are responsible for starting about 11% of wildfires, but those same 11% of wildfires are responsible for about 50% of the damage created by wildfires, which means those are the most extreme, most destructive wildfires. And so utilities understand this risk and are investing very aggressively to prevent it. And they're doing everything from improving the work that they think about in terms of capital investments, vegetation management. So overstory is a good example. We were talking to PG&E recently, and PG&E spends $1.5 billion a year just trimming trees and branches back from their lines. I think their CEO, Patty, often says that they actually are the biggest landscaper in all of California. And then companies like you mentioned with Gridware, who are enabling public safety power shutoffs and rapid de-energization of lines when there is contact. So how do we help them operate more efficiently and also safer? I think this is going to be a trend that only increases as we think about the need for more power, more infrastructure with AI, increased data centers, increased renewable assets.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another type of subsector that I focused on in that research as well was just with innovation to do with materials and design. And so I spoke to a lot of innovators working on fire-resistant materials. I think the main issue they had is that their technology is mature, but there seems to be some kind of gap in getting VC investments. I think there's just a longer return of investment period. So that case really isn't there according to them. So just wondering, is that something that you see as well, or is there not an investment case for this type of technology?
We look at each company on a very individual basis. We also have not made any materials investments. For us, some of these same challenges exist, which is the timeline is very long. The impetus for getting utilities to adopt new infrastructure investments, not on the software side, but on the hardware side, can be very slow. And then figuring out the right multiples for businesses like this, where the outcome can be large enough, is also challenging. In terms of their effectiveness, we know it's tremendous. But what we also know is that it's very expensive for utilities to make these types of decisions. So we haven't been able to get one across the finish line yet. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of regulatory barriers as well with any type of new material or design. And I guess just to kind of wrap up the conversation, any words on kind of what you're excited about coming out of fire tech, if there's any gaps that you think we really need to fill in terms of clean tech innovation here?
We think there's a ton of opportunity for new companies to impact the fire tech landscape. We need better tools to support first responders, to help them be safer, to help them be more effective, to help with labor shortages. We think there are tools that can be faster in terms of responding, whether that's initial rapid response, whether that's a drone or an autonomous helicopter. And we also think, again, to this idea of how do we make forests more economically productive, where we can do a lot of this work to unwind some of the decisions we've made over the last 30 years, where tree density in California has increased 3 to 5x in forests, and it creates these tremendously intense, very hot fires that no longer can be managed by firefighting organizations.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to in the sector in the next few years, and I'm looking forward to seeing what investments your team does next as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really hopeful that there'll be some amazing entrepreneurs who help. At the end of the day, technology can't solve this by itself, but technology can be a tremendously effective tool to be a resource for us.
Yeah, thank you.